Good morning. Thanks for joining us in the Stagwell Speakers Lounge today. I'm Jessica Henrichs, president of Colle McVoy. It's a rainy Wednesday here in Cannes, but hopefully you're going to bring a little sunshine to us today.
I didn't bring an umbrella.
Not an umbrella? Okay, well, that's all right. At least we're prepared for this moment. So I'm joined by Daykin. He's the Global VP of Media for Suntory. So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It's so nice to have you. How's your Cannes experience been so
Been,
far?
I mean, it's so good being back and be able to see people, connect. I've only been at my company now for 3 months, so it's been a great time to just like reconnect with some partners, be a bit inspired by some content, and get to talk about media again.
That's great. Yes, that's why we're here. Well, speaking of that, tell us a little bit about your background and your role now at Suntory.
Yeah, I've been a consumer goods marketer for the past 15 years or so, mainly in the digital or the media space. So I've done quite a lot of the big ones. I did Mondelez, I did Diageo. I've just been at GSK Consumer Healthcare, which is Advil and Sensodyne and things. And I've come back into the world of alcohol to work at Suntory, which is kind of an American-Japanese company with sort of Jim Beam and Maker's Mark, and then Suntory whiskies. So lots of really, really great, fine products. And I'm passionate about marketing, and I holistically, but for whatever reason, I've always been drawn into like the digital side of it. I think, well, it's kind of the last 15 years have been a great time to work in digital and to try and solve that for businesses and to try and help them kind of make sense of that, because although digital has brought loads of really great opportunities, it's also brought quite a lot of kind of noise and complication. And yeah, so I drive a global team now at Suntory. We've not really had a global media team before, so we're kind of building that, shaping that, and thinking like, what do we do to really step up our game and transform our business?
That's exciting. Well, you've called yourself a digital evangelist,
yes,
but also a realist. So could you elaborate a little bit on that?
It's exactly that. I think I've spent a lot of time being very passionate about new things that come out in digital. You know, when social platforms first started existing, really sort of like, wow, you know, we've got hundreds of millions of people looking at this. We should be there. But I also see that the digital industry can have a tendency to push itself a little bit too far, too crazy. Like, you know, TV's dead, nothing works anymore. Everyone has to do this metaverse thing, or your brand will only exist in 5 years. And I've always found that, like, when you're trying to bring, like, you know, really senior stakeholders, finance and CMOs along the journey, you actually drive faster transformation if you advocate for the digital, but you're realistic about, like, you know, we're testing and learning this, and like some of the stuff we work really still works. Consumers are still consumers. You still need to reach them. You still need to connect with them. So I'm very much like, I love a new technology. I love testing new things. We've done lots of innovative stuff. I want to keep doing that. But we always say, like, we're testing this because we know it's cooking, because we know this is the future. But it's okay, guys, you know, stuff that works is great. Keep doing that. We don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
So it's finding that balance.
It's finding that balance because, yeah, I've come from a real digital background, but I love TV. TVs are fantastic. And actually, TV's changing a lot at the moment. You can do a lot more interesting addressable stuff, interactive stuff. So, yeah, find the balance and try and steer away from those crazy over-the-top statements of, like, this is the only way to do it, or everything else is dead.
Yeah. Well, so will we be seeing Suntory in the metaverse anytime soon?
I think you will see us in the metaverse. I think we're really interested in that space, in NFTs as well, like without sharing any business. Like, we sell premium whiskey, and that's something which is quite collectible, quite pricey, quite hard to get hold of sometimes. One of the biggest things, a lot of our products sell out. So there's an interesting space there. And I think definitely we will find our role in the metaverse, but I think it can be a little bit forced at the moment, the way some brands are kind of like jumping in, and like it's not build it and they will come. Like, if we built Suntory land in the metaverse, I'm not sure who would come. Maybe actually we have some very passionate like Lefroy fans and things, but yeah, we're working through that. We'll all be there eventually.
Right, I agree. Well, it's becoming more common for people to understand that marketing science and creativity are not mutually exclusive. So what's your point of view on this, and do you think one holds more weight than the other?
Well, I think marketing science, for me, it's like being an architect, and marketing science is like the kind of the laws of physics. So I'm a big fan of kind of like how brands grow, and Byron Sharp and Ehrenberg Bass and stuff, and they've taught us some real fundamentals, like this is how you build marketing. You know, you've got to drive penetration, you've got to drive growth, some of these things. But where that goes wrong, I think, is when you kind of take that and you try and like cookie cutter it and say, like, right now all my brands just follow this equation, because it isn't like an equation. That's the rules. Like, if you're building a building, if you build every building the same, it stands up. but it wouldn't look great, and
Yeah.
people wouldn't necessarily want to live in it. So yeah, you've got to know those rules, and then you've got to bring in creativity. That's why our creative partners are so important. Even in media, you can be creative. So I think ultimately the creative is more important, but the creative only works if it's built on those kind of foundations.
Sure.
It's like if you design the most beautiful building in the world, but forgot to make it stand up, it would be pointless. So.
Have you seen any examples here of that inspire you?
I haven't seen many. I've been in a lot of meetings. I think it's been really. I spent the morning a really interesting meeting with IARD, which is a lot of different alcohol advertisers and platforms, and I think AB InBev have been announced as one of the, I think perhaps the market of the year or something like that. And they've just done some really great work. So as a competitor, it's interesting to see that. I think brands are getting it. Brands do get the importance of creativity. I think that's why Cannes is such an important thing to be at. And I think from a media side, we tend to spend our times in dark rooms having meetings and things. From a creative side, I think it's so important to soak up those campaigns. I will spend some time seeing the work and actually getting some of that inspiration.
Well, it's a good day for it today.
It is, yeah, you don't want to be out today
inside.
in the rain. So yeah.
Well, you literally wrote the book on inclusive marketing and why representation matters. What are some key takeaways that you could share with us?
Yeah, it's out in October actually, so it's very exciting. My side hustle is I'm a World Federation of Advertisers Global Diversity Ambassador. There are two of us and we're in town, and great to talk about this topic because D&I is so important. And often we talk about it internally in our teams and our businesses, which is really, really important. But the book and some of the bit that we're trying to drive them, it's also about the impact we have as companies externally. So like, is our advertising showing stereotypes? Is our advertising talking to consumers? And it's an easy business case because you really need to speak to consumers, you really need to talk to and relate to different people. And the book and some of the thinking that we've done with a whole bunch of other advertisers, with Unilever and Mars and others, is really saying like, we kind of all want to do that, but we're not always getting there. Why not? And we kind of broke it down into like 12 stages of the creative process. And we said it's not just about when you're filming, casting, like just trying to sprinkle some diversity in. It's like at the very start, like start with your brief, start with your insights, start by really listening to different voices, different communities. Really, at Beam, we talk a lot about practicing empathy. Like it's our job as marketers not to create marketing for us, but for people who are very different to us. And so that's what we try to unpack, and there's also like a lightweight version of it, which is the WFA guide we've made. But it's really pushing advertisers to see that it's a business benefit to do diversity in your advertising. It's also a societal benefit, like positive representations really, really matter and can help change things, and negative representations do the opposite thing. And it's easy to do if you break it down step by step and just try and solve it for different parts of your business.
So are there any immediate, I mean, it's Pride Month this month.
Yes.
And
Pride
so,
Month.
yeah, happy Pride Month. And so, a lot of brands are sort of stepping into that space. Are there any watch outs or recommendations for brands as they're thinking about how to celebrate?
Yeah, I love brands stepping up to things like that, but I have caution. I'm not always sure Pride Month is the best place to start. I think like to do that authentically, you kind of want to be talking to, representing those communities, LGBT communities, black communities, whatever it is, kind of all year round. You want to be doing activations that are longer term, with partners that are longer term. You want to make sure, there's a step one, which is thinking about your own business and your own policies and inclusion and things. I mean, I think then when you turn up at Pride and you're like, we're here to celebrate Pride, we're here with you, you're less likely to have people being like, why are you suddenly showing up here? Where were you the rest of the year? Or like, digging in and saying you don't even have a policy for, people who transition during your business or something. So, but I always say with a bit of hesitation, I think it's still great that brands want to start, and if they want to start there, brilliant. But you've got to be careful of like overly shouting and saying like I'm a massive ally for this community if you're not actually doing something which.
If you're not doing
helps.
the work.
Yeah,
looking internally. Yeah,
and some of that can be quite casual. Like I think there's quite a lot of power in casual representation of different diverse communities. So like an advert with LGBT people in doesn't have to be an advert about pride or being gay. It could be a couple are having a wedding, and you just thought, actually, it's going to be a lesbian couple in this, and it's and often that brings a different level of humanity, and there's quite a lot of research that shows that adverts like that stand out more, impact more. So it's just a win-win for business and society.
Well, are there brands that you admire who you think are doing that well?
I used to work there, so maybe that's cheating. But GSK, where I used to work, I really like how we've taken that and we've really built it in. So from our insights forwards, they were really thinking. They've done like a 3-year, I think now it is in the UK, partnership with Gay Times. So they were specifically going to talk to the LGBT community, and they thought, well, let's work with a media owner that understands and knows that community. They've tried a few different things with them. They've tried some of that activation is really like, let's talk about pride and LGBT people and sport, and some of it's more like, let's just make a Sensodyne advert that happens to have some LGBT inclusion and things. They've done some surveys along the way to find out like how our consumers, what do consumers want from a brand and space, how they're sealing that. And it's very holistic, and I think P&G is probably, I mean, they're good at everything, but they stand out in terms of like a company that's really said, we care for this, and it's not just a tick box. They have like dedicated people leading like the LGBT activation, leading what they're doing in black media, and I think they really stand out as a company that's not just a little tick box here, but let's actually think about what this means, and it's going to grow their business, so why not?
Yeah, that's great. Well, switching gears a little bit, how can big brands go local to drive consumer relevance?
Yeah, I think that is a thing we're trying to unpack as we build like a global media team, for instance. One of the things that we don't want to do is completely centralize all those decisions, all those discussions, because there is so much importance that comes local. It is a tricky one. It's not, and actually, given the conversation we were just having, it's not just local. It's also different communities within companies, different people. You have to find ways to stay close, to stay local. And I think from almost like a procurement perspective, it's a really good challenge to put on yourself, to make sure you're not just working with kind of big global partners, but you look for like, especially if you've got a home base, you look for like local companies. Like we do quite a lot of stuff with some advertising agencies out of Kentucky for some of our bourbon and things like that. I think also just looking for partners who have more diverse representation, different backgrounds, different people. But it's our job as marketers to do that. So it's hard to be local and nuanced. It's hard to do marketing that doesn't suit you, it suits other people, but that's our job. So you just need empathy. And from an alcohol perspective, we do it quite a lot because we're quite focused on culture, and therefore we're quite focused on the big influential cities in the world. So we don't just have like UK, US advertising. We're like, what are we actually doing in New York? What are we actually doing in Chicago? I think that forces us to be a bit more, because of course those cities are similar in many ways, but also have real big differences, and where possible you want to bring them out. But it's not easy when you're also trying to create big ideas that work everywhere.
Well, you mentioned a focus on culture. Can you talk a little bit more about that and why that's important for your brands?
I think it's definitely something I've always been passionate about everywhere I've worked. But I think the alcohol industry is an industry that's even more important because alcohol is just by nature involved in culture. So many kind of, the reason you would drink is often a celebration, it's a party, it's sports, it's the Oscars, it's, you know, any sort of... It's any kind of moment like that. And I think alcohol is also such a... It's driven by those moments. Like your favorite whiskey is probably, if you have a favorite whiskey, it's often driven by like partly the flavor and everything, but also like when did you have it? What was that experience? What was that moment? And if you're associated with those key events, those key moments, I think we're working out how to do that. And it's obviously you get into, there's so many different things going on and so many moments you want to be a part of. How do you do that? I think one of the great things from an alcohol perspective is as well as our kind of media and our marketing and everything above the line, we have presence in bars, we have presence on the ground. So if people are going to watch a game, if you go to the like the Met Stadium, there's a Jim Beam bar, we're there. So I think it's balancing like how much of that it's not just like let's post tweets that jump on every kind of little cultural moment. It's like let's really be there and work out our role. I think it's a real challenge. And into that, the bit we talked about at the start about being a digital realist kind of thing, I think sometimes when we talk about being like real time and culture, people jump to that extreme of like, I just need to like tweet all the time and jump on every single moment. I don't think that's what being part of culture is. Being part of culture is finding the right moments to like truly meaningfully be part of.
That are authentic.
And being like, today was a special day for like the National Chocolate Day or something, but we didn't post about it because it just wasn't part of our strategy, and that's okay.
Maybe in your past life, your
chocolate history.
I
mean, if it was National Chocolate Day, which I'm not sure is a thing, but if it was, then yes, absolutely. Cadbury's and Mondelez, and they would be going mad for it.
Yeah, oh, that's great. Well, speaking of spirits, going back to that, what is your spirit category of choice?
Well, I work very much for a whiskey company now. I'm a gin drinker. It's become huge in the UK, and we have a really great Japanese gin called Roku. tastes perfect with tonic and a bit of ginger, and that would be my drink of choice. If I see it at the back of a bar, I'm like, this is a good place. It's a good bar.
You heard it here. Oh, that's great. Well, there's so much good storytelling too that goes into the making of spirits.
Yeah.
Do you see the opportunity to tap into those stories?
We really do, and I think spirits are an interesting category. Because if you really reduce it, it's like a bottle with a slightly brown liquid in or something. It's delicious and wonderful, and it's exactly that. Like it's taken 12 years to make this, and it's taken like real craft, real blending, like the art of like blending like a maker's mark. We still have like blenders there, and especially some of our Japanese whiskey, like the Suntory brands, have this incredible heritage of having kind of learnt from Scotch whiskey, brought that to Japan, and like many things in Japan, like really perfected that art of how to make that. I think that's definitely a story we want to tell more. Like our Suntory, our whiskey actually kind of sells out. We make every drop of it that we make sell out. We still, and it has a really great reputation amongst whiskey lovers, but we want more people to know that story, more people to understand the craft that goes into it. So yeah, and I think that's a great opportunity, and what alcohol companies can do really well, like bring together life, our craft, our quality, and then how that comes together with culture. And I think that's how you start building great alcohol brands.
It's great. Well, if I had known then what I know now, blank, what's the best lesson you've learned from your career?
Well, I think my best lesson is to treat partners as partners. And I think I've worked in some different cultures and some different companies where like your agencies and your partners, you keep at arm's length, and you want to keep them in their little boxes and things. I think the more you see that the ecosystem, you should build a good ecosystem of partners, of teams, and just think about them as your team. And it was what I used to tell my GSK team. I was like, we are not us versus our agency. Yes, we have slightly different agendas at times, but we are one team. And I think if you apply that to like everything, you get better work done.
That's great advice.
If you break down some of those barriers and say we're all on the same side.
Well, you did brighten the day today. Thank you.
It is sunny now. We're live.
It's sunny now. Yes. Thanks so much, Jerry. Appreciate your
Thank
time.
you for having
Enjoy
me.
your can experience.
It's been a great
It's
conversation.
Pleasure.